Start today's program with the latest global cyber attack that struck and damaged computer systems in some of the biggest companies in the world. The attack appeared to have struck first in Ukraine, which suffered the greatest damage, then spread through Europe and into the United States. It also appeared to have utilized a modified version of a ransomware program called Petya that infiltrates and shuts down computer programs and demands payment from users in order to restore service. But one country that appears to have escaped almost unscathed from this attack, Israel. Well, joining me in the studio now is Daniel Cohen. He is a researcher at the Cyber Research Center at Tel Aviv University, and our defense correspondent, Chloe Lew. Chloe, Israel just lucky or perhaps being prepared for this kind of thing?
So Israel came out almost unscathed. There were 3 companies that were hit, and Israeli cyber experts are attributing that low number to the vigilance of Israeli users. Now, earlier this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that at any given moment, Israel's under 3 to 5 cyber attacks. And again, experts say the reason that these attacks don't cause more damage is because of Israel's advanced cyber defense technology. Now, this attack is again turning people's attention to Israel as a leader in cyber defense because Amit Serper, the man who discovered the vaccine for this malware, is actually an Israeli cybersecurity researcher who lives and works in Boston, but works for the Israeli-founded company Cybereason. And he had an interesting story for how he discovered the vaccine to this malware.
I'm here in Israel on vacation. I'm staying at my parents' house, and I had about 3 hours to kill. I was with my laptop. I started reverse engineering some samples of this malware, and I found out that when it starts, it checks if it's already running, if it's already encrypting, because it doesn't want to encrypt the files twice. So it checks if a file with a certain name exists in a certain place on the computer. So I just said, okay, so what happens if I'll just create that file?
Daniel, demanding ransom, so the assumption is that it was largely a criminal element behind it, but could there have been some political, some state involvement in this as well?
For now, only as a speculation, because we need to take a few more days or weeks until we understand exactly what happened. But if we compare it to attack last month, the WannaCry attack, in the beginning it looked like criminals behind it, but then we saw that we can find footprints, digital footprints, that we can link it to states. In that case, it was North Korean. In this case, it looked even much more sophisticated. So for me, it looks like a cover-up. It's not criminals behind it. It's states that want to disrupt and use cyber against critical infrastructure, also against businesses, and to do it for a total disruption and anarchy in specific countries.
Well, we're only speculating here, but since the primary target or the initial target seems to have been Ukraine, could there be Russian involvement?
If we analyze since the war started in Ukraine, we saw that the war attack, again, against critical infrastructure, it was against electricity, energy, complete shutdown of electric companies in Ukraine in the past couple of years. So yes, it could be an option that it was directly against Ukraine as part of the conflict going on there. Maybe the Russians are involved in it because of that. But we still need to notice that Russian companies were also being infected by this attack, and also in other parts of the world. But it did start in Ukraine.
Daniel, we've heard there is some defenses that can be used against it, but can this virus or bug or malware be tracked to its source, perhaps with the possibility of actually capturing or at least identifying the people involved in it, behind it?
It will be very hard to prove it. This is a main million-dollar question on cyber, who is behind the attacks. Very hard to prove. But as I said before, with the North Korean, we saw footprints that we can compare between and see similarities, and then try to, at least in a geostrategic, geopolitical analysis, to analyze who was behind it. I have to say that if we want that to happen, it needs to be a cooperation, sharing of information between different national certs, like in Ukraine and other parts of the world. Israel, of course, has been one of the leaders in cyber, can assist here. And if that will happen and we see international involvement, international collaboration, maybe then we can really notice who's behind it.
And briefly, we can expect more of this in the future, can't we?
We will expect more of that. We will see it even in more harder ways than we see now, that we can't accept it now. I'm very skeptical in that saying that, but we will see more ransomware attack, but also new kinds of attacks that for now we can't even put a finger on it.
Okay.